on 6.1, okay, so the first page just says, hey, it's a study guide. Second page is a formula sheet. And then you have the other page, which is 6.1. I think you guys are front and back, though. Okay? So on 6.1, the SOL we're talking about deals with ratios. And up at the top, just make sure that you know how to write the ratios in the three separate ways. As a fraction, A over B, using the word 2, A 2B, and using the colon, A colon B. Make sure that you write the ratio in the order that it is asked. So when it has a question and it says, I want the ratio of boys to girls, because boys was the first word that I read in my ratio, the number of boys has to come first. Okay? If it's a fraction, then that means the boys has to be on top. Okay? Now, would my ratio of boys to girls be the same ratio of girls to boys? No, because I would put on the second part, when I say girls to boys, the emphasis is going to be on my girls, because they're going to come first. So the fraction might look like a reciprocal of each other, okay, but they're not the same fraction, okay? So pay attention to that really quickly. What I want you to do right now is I want you to do questions 1 through 6 on that first page. We're going to go over. All right, so now on number 1, on your SOL, what you would end up having to do, it says, what is the ratio of squares to all shapes? Well, I'm going to compare squares to all. So I would probably write that down. Now, how many squares are on there? 5. How many total shapes do you have on there? Okay, so there's my ratio. Now, what I noticed, though, is when I look at my answers, they've used the colon. So it's all I need to do is rewrite it using the other method. And so C would be your answer. That's all the justification you need to do on the SOL test. Okay? So don't give me just C and stop. Okay? Number 2 says, and look, on number 2, that weird name, it's not a name that we use in Southwest Virginia probably. Don't get fixed on, I don't know how to pronounce it. Just create a name. Who cares about the name? Okay? T owns a guitar store with 150 guitars in stock. He has 90 electric guitars and the rest are acoustic. What is the ratio of acoustic to electronic guitars? Are you having a problem? Then quit bouncing up and down. We know, the information I know, there's a total of 150 guitars. The electric guitars, they said, was 90. And so the rest were acoustic. Well, I need to figure out how many acoustic I have, so I'm just going to subtract, and I get 60. Now, the ratio they asked me to find was the acoustic guitar to the electric. Well, when I put my numbers in, we have 60 acoustic and 90 electric. Well, what I notice here is I need to reduce that down, so I'm going to reduce by 10, which eliminates the zeros, is all that's doing. So now it's 6 to 9. And now what I notice is this can reduce by 3. So that means that's a 2 to 3 ratio. Well, they actually used the word 2 in there, and so A would be my answer for number 2. Yes. Okay. That way I know what your thought process is going through all that. Okay. And you could abbreviate these, T for total, E for, I mean, I'm fine with that instead of writing out, but I'm writing it out so you'll know when you go back and look, okay? Number 3 and 4 kind of go together. Now, on the SOL test, you're not going to have 2 questions that are identical like this. They've kind of changed a little bit, but for the most part, the wording is all the same. 3 and 4 says there are 20 green discs and 100 purple discs in a bag. What is the ratio of purple disc to green disc? Well, as I'm writing out, they gave me green total first and then purple total. Well, when they asked the question, they actually wanted purple first and green second. Okay, so be very careful that you don't accidentally flip that around. Okay, so the question asked for purple to green, so that was 100 to 20. Well, again, I need to reduce, so I'm going to reduce by 10. So that gives me a 10 to 2 ratio. And then again, I can reduce by 2. So this gives me a 5 to 1. Okay. Now, in question number 3, okay, the other way for me to write 5 to 1 was using the colon, or I can make it a fraction. And in this case, it was my fraction, so that was A. That was number 3. Okay. Now, number 4, same question, and just set it up a little different. From the beginning, they made my fraction. So they said that was 100 to 200, I'm sorry, 100 to 20. And then they reduced, and if you reduce by 10, you can get 10 over 2, then reduce by 2, and it gives you 5 over 1. So my fraction, which was 100 over 20, reduced down to 5 over 1, would have been A as well. Okay? You could have. Yeah. You could have reduced it down by, what, 20 from the get-go, and I'm fine with that. Okay?
Okay, would that be anywhere you have to put a certain, like, fraction or to something on? There'll be any questions that you only have to do.
No. Now, I mean, it may depend on the answer. Okay? Like some of the answers, maybe I'm wording and using the word to, and I might have to convert it to either a fraction or the colon. Okay? Or a question may be which of the following is not a way to represent this as a ratio. Okay? And so one of those may be incorrect. Okay? As far as that. Do not use out of. That's not a ratio wording. Okay? I can make a fraction out of that, but it's not really a ratio word set up for a ratio. Okay, so did you flip it? Because, okay, and that's what I'm saying, you really have to pay attention, because that's a typical thing SOLs do, is they'll give you the wording, the information, and they give you the information backwards to what they want you to stop it for. So, okay, so really make sure, that's why I like writing things down so I can go back and match. Also remember that on the SOL test, when you finish a problem, when you click next, you cannot go back. So you've got to make sure you're comfortable with your answer. Okay? My suggestion is, after you've worked it, if you feel like you need to rework it again, get a new sheet of paper. Now, it could be an old piece of paper, okay? You may have 2 sets of paper going on, first time through, second time through. I don't care, okay? Just label it so when I go and look, I know what you're doing, okay? But work it a second time on a new sheet of paper. That way you don't see your previous work. Sometimes if you see your previous work, you start to do what you were doing a minute ago. So it doesn't help you to rework it if you're going to keep that one right in front of you, okay? All right, question 5. It says, what is the ratio of the number of gray circles to black? So I'm going to compare gray to black. How many gray circles do I have? And how many black circles do I have? Okay, this one I used the word to, which is how they gave the answers, and so D was my answer. Okay, be careful, because see, they flipped it. Okay, so be careful on that. Number 6, a bag contains red apples and yellow apples. The ratio of red apples to yellow apples in the bag is 9 to 4. Which of these statements could be true? There are exactly 6 red apples and 1 yellow apple. There are 18 red apples and 8 yellow apples. There are 4 red apples and 9 yellow apples, or there's 9 red apples and 13 yellow. Well, the first thing I need to do is in the second sentence, tell what it's comparing. I'm comparing red apples to yellow apples. And then it said that it was a 9 to 4 ratio. Now, can this reduce? Can 9 to 4 reduce? No, they don't share anything in common, so it can't reduce to smaller. Can I do a multiple of these? So if I multiply by 2, that means both of these get multiplied by 2. That becomes an 18 to 8, correct? What if I go back to the original and multiply by 3? Hello. So it'd be 27 to what? 27 to 12. Now I can keep going with that for a while, but I want to stop and kind of read my things again to see which ones match up. Okay. It said there are 6 red apples and 1 yellow. Well, because I can't reduce, I can't really drop the red apples down evenly unless I go down to 1. Okay. So that one's not true. B, there are 18 red apples and 8 yellow. Well, right there, they've multiplied both by 2. So B is your answer, but I'm going to check C and D. C says there's 4 red apples and 9 yellow. They just switched the order of these two numbers around. So that's not correct. And there are 9 red apples and 13 yellow. Well, they probably got 13 by adding these two to get a total instead of yellow. Okay, so there's no way I can convert up to that as well. So B is my answer for that. Okay. All right. Now, go to the next page, which is 6.2. We're going to talk about fractions, decimals, and percents. Okay. First thing, fractions. If I'm going to convert fractions to decimals, and then change those decimals to percents, to go from a fraction to a decimal, I'm going to divide. From a decimal to a percent, I'm going to move the decimal 2 places to the right. Now, in other terms, what I'm doing is I'm multiplying that by 100, and that becomes my percent. Okay? So y'all should be writing that down. The other thing we can do is go from a percent to a decimal to a fraction. Now, to move from a percent to a decimal, I'm going to move the decimal 2 places to the left. Yeah. Which means you are dividing by 100. Because all that does is just move your decimal 2 places to the left. It's not on the back of your desk. It might be on the front of your desk, but it's on the back of her desk. Okay? I don't think she's like tossing it where it's in your face or anything, so you'll be okay. Decimal to fraction, you are now going to put the number over the place value and reduce. And we're going to go to the next page in a minute and do that, okay? Yes, I would, because it's a study guide to help you. Okay? And these are going to be on the YouTube, so, all right, so if there's something you don't get, you can always go back and get it. What? No. On YouTube, it's just Jennifer Woodleaf. Now, on Facebook, it's Miss Woodleaf's class page. So you can go to Russell County Moodle and go through it that way, but if you just go to YouTube, just pull up my name. Should be. All right, everybody good? Okay, just take a few more seconds, and if not, leave room, and we'll come back. All right, when we talk about place values, when you have your decimal, okay, and I'm just going to go 3 places. Remember, the first place after is the 10th position, so that means whatever fraction you have is going to be over 10. If it goes to 2 places, this is your 100th place. So that means that's going to be over 100. If you go 3 places, that's your 1000th place. And so the 3rd place would be over 1,000. So some examples, if you have 0.4, that's going to become 4 over 10, and then I would reduce, okay? If it's 2 places, it's going to be over 100, and then you would reduce. If it was 3 places, even though I only have one number, it fills the 3rd place, that's going to be over 1,000, and then reduce, okay? So that's how you go from your decimal to your fraction, okay? Now the only other thing on that we need to write, percent is always over 100. Okay, so if you have 25%, if you need to change that to a fraction, you're just going to put 25 over 100. Okay, so that's all you're going to do there. Now, what I want you to do is work questions 1 through 7. All right, looking at the SOL 6.2s, number 1, it said what percent of the grid is shown. So I need to find the shaded to the total. Okay, so when I counted the shaded, there were 60 shaded over my 100. So if I made that a fraction, which is 60 over 100, and if you remember, percent is always over 100, so this becomes 60%, which would be C. Okay, now if for some reason you needed to and you divide it, you would have gotten 0.6, and then move your decimal 2 places, and that still would have given you 60%. So even if you had to go through the decimal first, that's fine. Okay, anybody have a question on number 1? Number 2 says what ratio correctly represents 0.1%. Now, yes, I said that this number always goes over 100, but that is 0.1 over 100. Now, I don't see anywhere down there that you have a decimal within your answer. Now, what I can do is I can move this decimal over 1 place, but what's going to happen to this bottom decimal? It's going to also have to move over 1 place, which means I need to put 1 in there to have that as a spot holder. A 0, so that makes it become 1,000, right? So that would be 1 over 1,000. Now, the other thing you can do is you can change this percent to a decimal by moving it 2 places to the left. So this becomes 0.001. Okay? Now you're going to put this over the place value, and so what place value is the 3rd place? It's 1,000ths. So you're going to put 1 over 1,000. What did you divide by? Okay, where did 1, but what's 1 divided by 10 is 0.1, not 0.1%. You changed from the fraction to a decimal and just put the percent sign on there. Now, that's okay to go 1 divided by 10 is 0.1, but remember to go from that decimal to a percent, I've got to move it to the right two places. And when I did that, I would have gotten 100. Okay? Or, I'm sorry, 10, but... Okay. All right, so everybody understand how I got what we did? So in this case, D was my answer for number 2. Okay. Question number 3. Of the students in Mr. Smith's math class, 30% of them are boys. What is the decimal for the part of the class that are boys? Well, he already told me 30% was boys. So I need to change this percent to a decimal. So I'm going to move it 2 places to the left, and so that becomes 0.3. And so B would be my answer. Now, pay attention to that question, because they may have still told me that 30% was boys, and then they may have said, what's the decimal of girls? Okay, well, first of all, what's the percent of girls? 70. Okay, so then at that point, I might have to use what I already know to find my girls, then to find my decimal. Okay, so just remember on how they ask that question. Number 4 says identify each value that represents the shaded part of the grid shown. So here again, we're going to put shaded to total. When I count those, I have 70 shaded to my total of 100. I can make this a fraction if I want to, 70 over 100. I can reduce by 10, which gives me 7 over 10. I can make this look like a decimal as 0.70 or 0.7. These two things are the same. And then if I change from decimal to percent by moving it 2 places, I get 70%. So of the ones on here, 70% is on there. 0.7 is on there. 7 over 10. And 70 over 100. Okay, so we had 4 answers. Okay, we'll talk about that later. Okay, so that is our 4 answers that number 4 could be. Okay. Number 5. Which number is equivalent to the ratio 6 over 5? Well, let's divide. 6 divided by 5 is 1.2. Now, if you need to do this by division, take your 5 and divide it into 6. That's 1. Subtract. I have a remainder, so I need to add a decimal and a 0. Then when I finish multiplying, that's where I get the 1.2 at. Okay? So this may be one of those you might have to do with no calculator. Okay? Now, after I get 1.2, if I change this decimal to a percent, I want to move it 2 places to the right. So that would be 120%. You could. You can make this as a fraction of 1 1/5. Is that what you're asking? Yeah. But again, if they ask for a decimal, you're going to have to know how to change 1 1/5 to 1.2. Okay? And I'm fine with that. Alright, so my answer for number 5 is C, which is 120%. Okay. Number 6, which statement is true? On this one, we're going to have to see what they all come out to be. 4 over 5, which is 4 divided by 5, is 0.8. The paper told me that was 0.08, so A is not the correct answer. B says 9 over 4. Well, when I divide this, I get 2.25. My paper said I should have gotten 0.4 repeating. That's not correct. C, if I take that fraction of 4 2/5, divide it, I'm going to get 4.4. Now, they got 4.4, but they got it as a percent. So if I change this decimal to a percent, that's going to be 440%. So that is not correct. And then D says 9 over 4. Well, we just did that. We said that was 2.25. And when I look at my answer, they change it to a percent. So that is 225%. So D is your answer there. Okay. Number 7, identify each value that is equivalent to 5:8. Now remember, I can rewrite this 3 ways. I can make a fraction, 5 over 8. I can use the word 2, 5 to 8. When I have my fraction, I can actually divide this, and when I divide, I get 0.625. When I change from my decimal to a percent, 2 places to the right, it becomes 62.5%. So which of the following is true? 5/8 is true. 0.625, 5 to 8, and 62.5%. So you have 4 answers there as well. Okay. Anybody have a question with number 7? Question number 8 said you're going to match the fraction or decimal with its equivalent ratio. Well, we're going to actually start with the fraction part. We're going to change these to decimals, and then we're going to change them to percents. 2 of them we know really quickly. What would they be, Ellie? 2 of them we should know from memory. Next time, just quit talking. Okay. 1/4. What's that? 0.25, because it looks like 1/4. And then if I make that as a percentage, it's 25%. What's another one we should know very quickly? Abigail? Okay, that's one we can know real quick, but there's another one that we should know from memory. Kaylee? No, that's not the one we should know from memory. Abby Howman? 2/3 was what? 6 repeating. And we went over those, and I said those are quick ones you need to remember, okay? Now, not saying the other ones do not come as quick, okay? Now, this one depends on how they round. It could have been one of the 3 following, okay? Depends on how the paper rounded, okay? Now, 0.2 to become a percent, move it 2 places. Now, Kaylee, what did you say 3/5 was? 0.6, and so that would be 60%. So when I match, 20% is the same as 1/5. 0.25 is the same as 1/4. 0.6 repeating is the same as 2/3. And 60% is the same as 3/5. Okay, next page. Okay, a few notes first. When it says steps for ordering rational numbers, the first thing you need to do is change all numbers to the same set or type. Now, I personally like to go to decimal form because that's in the middle. A fraction can go to a decimal and a percent can come to a decimal. Okay? If I go from fraction to percent, sometimes I have to work through a decimal before I get to a percent. So sometimes I may have to do longer processes. So I like to do decimals. Okay? Now you can choose every which one you want. The answer should come out to be the same. Okay? That's when you're ordering. Now we have some words down on the side that we're going to do. Ascending means you're increasing. So if I ask you to put it in ascending order, I mean from smallest to largest, least to greatest. Okay? Descending means you're decreasing. Okay, in value. That sign means equal. That means less than. Greater than. You have that, which means not equal. Now, at the bottom of that page 2, it talks about when you're comparing decimals, what you need to do are comparing fractions. So right now, I want you to do 9 through 14. Okay, 9 through 14. Number 10, which of these numbers is between 1/3 and 87 over 100? I need to convert these to decimals, so this is 0.3 repeating. This is 0.87. Then I want to change my answers, A, B, C, and D, to all decimals. So 3/5 is 0.6. 3/10 is 0.3. 92/10 would be 9.2. And 1100 is 0.11. So when I find a number that's between 0.3 and 0.8, I'm going to look at it. Well, 0.6 is between 0.3 and 0.8. So A is good. 0.3 is the same, but when I go to the hundredth position, it's no longer inside. This is smaller than 0.33 and 0.87. So B is no longer. 9.2 is much larger than 0.8, and 0.11 is much smaller than 0.33. So A is your answer for number 10. Number 11, list the numbers in order from least to greatest. So I'm going to take these and put these in all decimal form. A. So when you divide 2/3, you're going to get 0.6 repeating. When you change this percent to a decimal, it's going to go 2 places to the left. And this is already a decimal, so I'm going to keep it that way. So now when I look at the smallest 10th place, that's this one. So changing it back to the original form is 0.63%. My next smallest, these both share the same 10th position, but when I go to the 100th, I have a 6 and a 0, so this is my smallest. And so that makes 2/3 my largest between those numbers. I have a question on 11. 12, which decimals are in ascending order? Ascending means I'm increasing. I'm just going to write the numbers down and then we can change the order around. All of these are the same numbers. They just put them in different orders. Well, when I look here, the largest value is my ones place, and no other number has a ones place, so we know that's the largest number in there. Now when I start to compare, I'm going to look at my 10th positions. These two are the smallest because they have 0. So I'm going to look at the 100th position, and that's a 0 and a 5, so we know 0 is the smallest. So that's the smallest. This is the second smallest because my tens unit is still smaller. And then this was the only number that I had left. So now if I compare again, those are in order from smallest to largest. So that would be B. Number 13. Which of the following is in descending order? This is decreasing. Okay. So if I look at my numbers, 3/4, 0.5, and 35%, I need to change everything to a decimal. So this is 0.75, 0.5, 0.35. Why I'm recording. Anyway, so I'm decreasing, so I need the largest. So when I look at my 10th position, my 7 is my largest, so that's the largest one. My next largest between 5 and 3 was the 5. And then the smallest was my 3, which is 35%. Okay? So in this case, A was my answer. Okay, 14. Put the following numbers in order from least to greatest. 45%, 0.305, 4/5, and 3/10. I would put these all as decimals. Least to greatest, the smallest. 10th position is my 3s. When I go to the hundredth, they both have a 0. When I go to my thousandths, this one is my smallest, so that's 3/10. Then 0.305. Between 0.8 and 0.45, 0.45 is my smallest. And then I have 4/5. You may have a question on what we did. Yes. 11. Yes. What we're going to do on number 11 is it said to put them in order from least to greatest. Okay, so I changed all of my numbers to the same thing. So I changed them all to a decimal. Okay? From there, when I look at my 10th place, I want the smallest. So in this case, my 0 was the smallest 10th place, so it's going to go first. Okay? Now, I change it back to the original number that it had. You could, but it's still going to come out the same. If you did it as a percent, which is fine, this one's going to change to 66.6%. This would be 0.63%, and this is 60%. So when you look, this is still my smallest percent, so he's going to come first. Okay? Don't play with him. He does nothing in math anyway. Second one then is 60% or 66. That would be 60. So I change it back to the original, which is 0.6. Okay? And then same thing here. Okay? So yeah, I'm fine. As long as they're all the same, it's okay. Downstairs. With Miss Di. Okay. Yep. Alright. When we go to 6.3, integers are the set of
6.3.
Yeah. I'm sure that's what you did. Positive numbers, negative numbers are 0. Okay, those are integers. You helping me there?
Same as I am, and from the same locations.
Oh.
So we're trying, so 56
I have no idea.
Don't
ask him.
You ain't got pizza.
Don't ask him.
You get pizza. Last year, did you get pizza and stuff for
I thought we had money.
buying this shit?
I know.
Ain't nothing in it.
Well, I don't know. Ask. Ask if I can go. Alright, then it says it can be helpful to graph the integers on the number line. I don't have it. I don't know if she brought it. Right there. The point farthest to the left would have the smallest value. And I'm just filling in those hints and notes at the top of 6.3. Okay? The point farthest to the right would have the greatest value, or largest value, if you want to use largest instead. Positive numbers are greater than 0, negative or less than 0. 0 is neither positive nor negative. A negative integer is always less than a positive integer. Do 1 through 10 very quickly. 1 through 10. All right, number 1. It says, which of these is an integer? Remember, an integer is a positive or negative whole number. A, even though it's a fraction, you need to see if you can work it out to become a whole number. It doesn't. It's a decimal, 0.7. That's not. B is already a decimal, 6.5, so that's not a whole number. C is a positive, it's a negative whole number, so C is your answer because a negative whole number. And D is not, because when you divide 3 over 8, you get a decimal. So C is your correct answer. Number 2, it says identify each number that is an integer. 9 is an integer. 2.79 is a decimal, so it is not. 4 squared, when you work this out, you get 16. That is an integer. Negative 1/3, when you divide this out, it's a decimal, so that is not. So that one is. 52 over 3, when you divide this out, you get a mixed number, so therefore it is not, because it would be a decimal. 68 over 17, when you divide this, you get 4, that is an integer. Negative 10 is an integer. And the square root of 144, which says what number times itself will give you 144. We know that's 12. That is also an integer. So you had 5 possible answers for number 2. First bell students, go to your locker.